good morning. This is Laura Meeks. You're listening to Laura Meeks Live on the Laura Meeks Show. And we are having an incredibly adventuresome life. All kinds of things are going on in the world out there where you guys are and where we are. And part of living this adventurous life where I dream, fly high, and then live an adventurous life, part of that is to gather more information and become more aware of the things that are going on around us in such a way that we can take that information and build a life that we would absolutely love. So realize that the world of circumstance right now seems like, what kind of circumstances are these? But honestly, I lived through the 60s and the 70s. There were all kinds of circumstances between then and now. There's always going to be a set of circumstances. And so what we want to do is that use the power within us to create a world that we absolutely love. And to do that, then you come to my show so that we can talk to people who are skilled in this area and can help us do the things that we need to do to craft that world that we absolutely love. So just to let you know, today we have Susan Lake is in the house. The title of the show today, by the way, is Thinking Outside the Box. So we want part of the solution and working to achieve the things that we want to do is sometimes we feel like we're in this box where we know what we're doing and we think we are in control, but we want to kind of think outside that box. So today I have Susan Lake, and let me read you some of the stuff that she's got. Susan Lake is a professional educator and a facilitator for the studies of meditation, mindfulness, and spiritual studies. She's an inspirational speaker and educator in the field of holistic health principles. So we're gonna go down that road today. She works with business women and is an advocate for programs that bring, and this is the outside of the box, brings together Eastern and Western healing together in one spot. We're going to use those modalities to achieve what we call the total person. Now, her work is specifically tied into the area of recovery and addiction. Susan is the facilitator of meditation and spiritual studies at the Advanced Therapeutic Service Center here in Rancho Mirage, California. That's kind of where our studio is. And she's also the founder of the School of Recovery. So that brings us to you, Susan. Welcome. How are you today?
Hi, Laura. Thanks for inviting me today.
Yeah, listen, honestly, just a joy not in the room or in the area of honesty, clarity. Susan and I have worked together for a long time. We've held a mind meld. What do we call that?
We had a really great masterminding meetup group that we did for a long time.
Yeah, and so it has been our work together has kind of bounced off each other as we are looking at ways to improve and understand the world that we live in. Now, let's start here. East and West Modalities School of Recovery. Tell us a little bit about the School of Recovery and how you got to where you are today. How about that?
Wow, that's a big question,
Wow.
Laura.
Let's just start with something light.
Well, first of all, I am categorized what people call as a complementary health practitioner. And I work in an environment at the Addiction Therapeutic Services Centers where I work among therapists and counselors who have prepared recovery programs for those people recovering from a variety of different addictions. And I felt like, first of all, it was groundbreaking for them to do that because I was right in the situation where you had Eastern and Western practices happening at the same time. And it's a great field and a great working ground to see people from beginning to the time that they leave their recovery, what that looks like, and what is their biggest questions about moving forward in their recovery. And that brought me to understanding the need for the School of Recovery unto itself. Because as you know, Laura, we're living in a world today where we are bombarded with technology. And it's really important for all of us to begin to go within to locate that inner technology. What is it in us that's going to enable us to enjoy a purposeful lifetime while we're here on this planet Earth?
on this.
So that's where the impetus, and that is where we find ourselves now in the field of recovery.
Well, let's talk. Let's. One of the things that we've talked about between you and me a lot, and I think this is a great place to start, is that when you got involved in the addiction world, and you started working with those particular people in a new way. So there's kind of this, how does it normally work here in the desert? We have a number of addiction recovery programs here. Betty Ford School is here in the desert, so some of the best are here. But one of the things that you and I found interesting is that there is kind of a normal path in the world of addiction where people go into the Betty Ford Center. That's kind of like a 30-day detox sort of thing. And I always kind of, in my mind, I always thought, well, okay, you just go there for 30 days and they kind of, fix you, and then you're out, and then, oh man, I'm recovering now. But in reality, that just is like just to get the alcohol or the drugs out of your system. And then
Mhm.
you go off into this other world where there's psychologists and recovery and all these other things. But there was this missing piece that you and I had worked on in meditation and other thought changing techniques that was not in this program, right? And then,
Well, I
so
think
tell us a
what
little bit about when you started down at the working with these patients.
Well, I think one of the biggest questions that I find individuals ask is, how do I do this? How do I make these changes being suggested to me? Um, how can I actually evaluate and give authority to something I have never experienced,
Yeah.
or I don't see any different than where I am right now? And I think one of the things that the School of Recovery uh, addresses is how we begin to change the way the mind is seen with us, both body and mind. What is that relationship? And through number one, through meditation, we actually experience a silence of the mind. And it's a place where we discover deeper consciousness, and we actually can also reach a place of what's called bliss, or that feeling of unity with all things, which causes us to understand what that authority we talk about means. But besides that, we have to learn really how to put the principle into work, into our everyday life. And so I've developed a complementary way of putting both things together, to where in the classroom, we encourage inquiry, deeper study of the self, listening differently, actual exercises where we relate what we're talking about to our life. And when we learn that the mind is both active and reactive, and we start to understand the situations that trigger different responses from us, and that we can distance ourselves from that and change the way we think to change our life. We suddenly have a tangible that we can begin to practice. And of course, Laura, we know this, anything you're going to do that's going to change your life. Let's take meditation for a moment. We want to get to the place where it becomes so enjoyable for us that we wish to be there more often. And that's how we begin to change and create a sustainable healthcare program where we can actually continue recovery.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that we found that I think was so interesting is that when you had gone down to work with ATS, there was again this program where they're in a sober living, and then they come over here and they get some counseling, and then there's kind of like a nuggets, a to-do list of things that they need to do. Yet when you started, all of a sudden there was this one class during the week where they come and join you, and you start teaching them this way to slow everything down. So in the recovery world, there's this, you got to stop drinking, and we're going to have all these techniques so that you're not eh, craving alcohol or drugs or whatever. But to me, the super missing piece was this part where they came to you and you started sitting with them. And so describe to me, because there's some really neat stories where you're just like in this room, and they're experiencing a calming mind for the first time, and then some of the reactions that they've had, because some of your students have had some very strong reactions, like, why doesn't anybody else teach us this? I think that's an important piece to get across.
Well, I think um, I like to think of myself as a team member, as part of the solution, first of all. And one of the principles and one of my values is that if you're going to be in the room with people and you are the teacher, let's say that you are demonstrating, you are the example of what are you talking about. So that demonstrating compassion starts with the instructor or the facilitator. What does that look like? And I believe that, we very often don't know what exactly it is, but we can tell, we have an instinct about the room feels calm, about patience, about someone listening to us, about compassion and empathy. And we only learn it by being in that environment and it being demonstrated by somebody's behavior. And I think that that's where it starts. And I have had many people sit in my class and say to me, well, I have tried to meditate, but I can't. There's too much going on in my mind. I'm very distracted and I feel nervous. Of course, we know there are several physiological things that can be contributing to that. But for the most part, people feel like meditation, there's a right and a wrong and a pass and a fail. And of course, we know that there is not. We also, if we find ourselves thinking about it as, okay, I have to either do this like everybody else in the class or else I'm the only loser here, we're feeding into the problem of probably insecurities and attachment to the outside world, which defines us by how good we are at something or how well we do it or where do we place ourselves on the achievement list. So being able to understand that when you close your eyes today, you're simply going to be in this space of quiet is a very comforting thought, number one. And there's no threat about that. And
Now,
I believe,
was
yes,
was this different?
excuse
Why
me.
why was this different for them? Why was coming to your class so different than what else they were doing?
Well, perhaps it might be because we have to be sure that we keep spiritual studies and religion in their separate areas in that sense. And a lot of times people will come to a spiritual class with preconceived ideas about what's going to happen there. And I think that what they found and what they continue to find, and those who will be in the school will find, is that it's a principle, it's a way of living our life. Our spirituality is separating from the outside world, our values and principles, and really connecting to the inner technology of our existence. How do we and number one, we have to actually experience stillness to understand what it is and to value it. And from there comes a relaxed state that allows people to now consider deeper concepts, deeper thoughts about what makes up spirituality. What about me? What about the way my mind works? What about the way I listen to people? What do you mean by happiness? What do you mean by relationships that are deep? And what is loving? Where does that come from? Does it come from out here or in here? So I in my practice and in my classes, those are areas of focus and concentration that we put at the forefront. We work from the inside out.
Well, now let's go back to take me back to your classroom. So here you are at the center. You've got 6 or 8 people, right? Come into your classroom,
Could be many more.
and all of a sudden, here are people who are, first of all, in my experience, they say they're going through alcohol recovery. They've been in this system. They've been told they have to stop drinking. Now they're in sober living, and they're kind of rebellious, just like. And then they come to your class like, oh my God, what's this lady gonna teach us about meditation? And they're tell me about some of the people who you encountered, because some of those people were like, yeah, whatever, lady, get on with it, let's get out of this class. But some of those people turned around. So tell me about that.
Well, I'm going to go back to this again, and that is, there we are. We're preconceived ideas about what is spiritual class. I remember in high school when we thought very many people thought when they went to music class, it was the time to relax and just kick off their shoes and do whatever. As you know, Laura, my beginnings in life was I went to a conservatory of music and performing arts. And so, here you have the student who can't wait to get in there. And then you have the student who's thinking, good, 40 minutes of rest, relaxation, chewing gum, whatever. Same thing in class. You have the student who comes in hopeful that there's going to be something heard there that's going to help them in some way. And then you have the person who does come in and thinks, well, this is another one of my classes. I would say this, it's like anything in life, you have to want to be there and you have to be ready to put in the work of anything. But before that ever happens, we need to walk into an environment where there's no threat of anything being forced upon us. In my classes, yes, I do set the stage, so to speak, for that transcending hour or 90 minutes or however you're with me to kind of tune out everything else, and how are we going to focus on what we're doing. One of the things that I do in the classes that I teach at outside institutions is actually an introduction to the mind-body relationship. What does that mean as far as spirit and meditation? How is meditation the vehicle that brings me there?
They're
And
connected.
I think that I'm unique in this sense. Throughout the class, we write. Throughout the class, we're doing assignments. Throughout the class, we're reflecting on what we're talking about and relating it to things that have happened in our life and what that meant and felt like to them. So I have had people come into the class and tell me about um, never experiencing meditation, and as I said earlier, what are the physical things that happen to them because of of even closing their eyes. And 6 to 8 weeks later, that same person on any given day closes his eyes again in attempt to meditation. And on that given day, they fall into deep rest or deep sleep and are amazed at the feeling of what happened and that it happened. But it happened because they tried continually to sit in silence and create that moment of silence for themselves. And that feeling of that deep rest, in many instances, is the impetus that creates someone to go, I like that. I want to be there again. And that's when we really begin to see how meditation affects us both
Well,
spiritually and physiologically.
one of the challenges that we face, I think, in America is we have kind of a strong belief in therapeutical drugs. We have very much a science-based system, and my experience with people going through a recovery program is that it's a lot of our current world in if we're going to talk about going outside the box, most of their box is really involved in detoxing you and then giving you some medicinal pharmacological solution to
Hmm.
help you, stay off of a particular chemical so
Yep.
that you don't fall back. But one of the tools that I think was a surprise,
Hmm.
not only to ATS, but to the students that you were in, is you're absolutely right. They're kind of geared towards like, okay, I got to go to therapy. I got to tell the psychologist, something, so they feel like I'm making some recovery, and so that I can get some control of my life back. And then they come in to your class where it's like, oh, this is like a woohoo spiritual thing. But what I've heard you tell me a number of times is how often somebody who's resistant, who's never meditated before, has gotten into a spot in their life where all of a sudden they're in your class and they're, like, I'm not going to close my, well, all right, I'll close my eyes. And then next thing you know, they end class like, whoa, that was like really important. Sadly, we're getting right towards the end of our first uh, segment. And so part of what I want to do, um, Susan, while before we go to break, tell us how can people connect to you and find out more about your School of Recovery? Where can they get information from you?
Yes, well, our website, which is www.schoolofrecovery.net, goes live in 1 week. Until that time, you can contact me at my email, which is susanlakeproductions@gmail.com. I would be happy to speak with you. And yes, please watch for our website. It will be up and live next week. And until that time, I welcome your communication by email.
Okay, and then you also have
And
a
yes,
Facebook site.
I also have a Facebook address, and that is at the @ SL Evergreen. And throughout this next upcoming week, we will be posting little trailers about the starting date for classes, which is August the 5th. At 5:30 in the evening is our first class, which will be starting, and we will update everybody on that Facebook page as well.
Okay, great. Well, stick with us. When we come back, I want to get down and dirty, into a little bit more of the experiences and where the School of Recovery is going to help people who are out there listening to either, if you're in recovery and or techniques, tools and techniques that we can help. So you're listening to the Laura Meeks Show. We are live and we will be right back. Stick with us. Hey, welcome back. This is Laura Meeks. You're listening to the Laura Meeks Show live here on Transformation Talk Radio. We are all about building the best life. I call it fly high living. And the way that you achieve fly high living is you discover and you deliver the gifts that are in you. there are talents that each of us have that we came down to this earth to deliver. And there are lots of ways to discover what those talents are and to live what I call the high, fly high life, and to engage your dreams, to engage your adventuresome spirit and think outside the box. That's kind of what we're talking about today, is how to think outside the box. If you didn't join the first part, we are here with Susan Lake. Susan is the founder of the School of Recovery. Her work has really hinged on blending this is the box, a typical recovery box. If you're in the addiction recovery healthcare system, is in America, is really kind of hinged around physical things like getting the alcohol and the drugs out of your system, and then coming up with some sort of pharmacological solution, adding into that some counseling, in an effort to help get you into a spot where your life can change for the better. But what I have found in my life and in Fly High Living and in the teaching that I teach is it's all about changing your thinking. If you can change how you view the world, if you can change your paradigm, if you can become aware of a different way to look at the things that you're seeing. So a lot of us are seeing COVID, a lot of us are seeing a challenge at work. There's all kinds of situations, and you could fear them, you could embody that fear and live that way, or you could change your thinking about how you think it. In the world of recovery, Susan has been adding in this critical extra piece of the metaphysical and spiritual side, the mindfulness that is required to change your picture of how that addiction and how that recovery is going to be handled. So, in the first half, we talked a little bit about the philosophical side. Susan, let's talk now. You've had a number of experiences where people are awakening to this extra piece, this there's Western medicine and there's Eastern medicine. And a lot of your School of Recovery is taking those two and kind of combining them into a kind of a bigger new box, on new tools and new things that we can craft to help them recover. Now, in and amongst that, though, people that come from this Western thinking, right? They're coming from this Western thinking, and all of a sudden they engage with Susan Lake in her class. There's often resistance, there's often a misunderstanding about what you're doing. And so tell me a little bit about people who you've encountered, and maybe an example of somebody who uh, has made a change, has awoken to what you are talking about. Tell me
Well,
some.
first, Laura, thank you for bringing the attention to the fact that Eastern and Western, the need for it to work together, because we know that there are in there, there's a big need for obviously therapists and counselors, and medications has its place in the field of recovery. We know that. On the other side, as traditional practices heal the body, spirituality heals the mind. And that's what we're talking about in the School of Recovery. That's really important to understand. How are we taking care of the mind? And that's where change happens. And yes, I have seen young people in my class over a period of time make some really important changes. For example, I have a young woman in my class who um, over the past 6 to 8 weeks, I gave an assignment about taking a topic we were working on in class, and over the weekend going home researching that topic, and how it applied to their life. And the young woman came back to class and said, "I'm really excited. Number one, I've gotten accepted at a college. Number two, I took that assignment home and began to do the research And it took me into science, and it took me into quantum physics, and it took me into a unified understanding of my place in the world. And she said, I got so excited about it. And she said, I'm going to, move my life into the area of medicine and the medical field. That's a tremendous show of inspired learning that the School of Recovery is. That's what I would like to address, is how do we change the way we look at things and make it more hopeful and bright and find our purpose. On the other spectrum, people who are angry, let's say, is part of what they're working with.
It
How
happens.
you answer questions as far as the solutions for situations they may have found themselves in the past, and how would they handle them today? And to be able to reflect on the fact that we're not going to handle anything out there, going to handle it here. And here's where it comes from. And here's how we deal with it when we feel it. And where do we feel it? And to make the choice of the outcome. Do I want to pick up that gauntlet, or or?
Or
So I think that uh, those are the kind of choices, and those are the kind of decisions that a school of learning with an actual program, an actual curriculum, really sets up the individual for learning something and carrying it again, Laura, not only into the classroom but into their life. That's where it's going to matter, because that affects, as we know, the community you live in, the relationships you have, and how do we handle those volatile situations that come into our everyday life from the perspective of the inner self. And how does the meditation look, how their reasoning, they get change their reasoning. It's great to hear people say to me, in the past I would have handled this by doing this, but now I found myself listening from a different place and not reacting this time as I would have back then.
now, let me ask you this: can't I, if I'm listening to this show and I'm thinking, oh yeah, 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 meditation's really good. I watch a couple YouTube videos and work on meditation. It seems reflect on that. Is there a need for a school? Do you have to go to a school? I mean,
I think school sets up a structure for people and keeps us accountable. I also think it puts us in an environment with like-minded people who are going to support what we're all doing there. And we create also what's called a spiritual community. And that is the blessing, the gift. And that is why school, I believe, is important to us in our development as people. Yes, nothing is more valuable than knowledge. And that's how we grow and we expand, and how we handle things differently as we move forward
well,
in our transformation.
yeah. Well, and in my coaching and in my teaching, one of the things that I found in my particular life is I'm pretty sharp. I learn things very quickly. I could uh, build a dream uh, for myself and learn the tools and do it myself. But there are dream, in my world, building a dream, following your flying high and living an adventure, some life. Part of the challenge that the school solves is the fact that you build this incredible dream, you write it down, you read it to yourself a couple times a day, and then you go home and you tell it to your parents, your brother, your sister, your wife or your spouse, and they go, "Oh, that's stupid. You can't do that." Bam, dream stealer. I mean, just bam, that's it. And part of, I think, what's great about the School of Recovery is that you're going to learn some of these techniques, like you say, in the company of some other people. So rather than just sitting in your office and watching a YouTube video going, I'm not sure, am I doing it right? It's so much better when you're in a group and you can say, well, and this happened to me in my very first meditation. I was in a group of about 8 people, and I had no idea if I was doing it right or wrong. And it was nice to be able to say, well, this is what I felt, or I felt distracted, or I was listening to the music, and it's nice to have a group of people there that are supporting you until you can kind of build up immunity from these people that are going to steal it. I mean, it's hard enough to reduce addiction, but you don't want to, I mean, imagine if you went through all this challenge and you went home and somebody offered you a beer or a drink. I mean, it's like, no, 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 I don't want to be around you yet. I got to get strong
Mhm.
to get going. So to me, isn't that part of what the school is there for? Is
Yeah. It's support. It's a support. I think, Laura, you mentioned something that's really, really important. We all have a vision, yes. And I think we also, in the School of Recovery, address this. I have talents and I have passions. And my talent doesn't necessarily mean that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And we have to come to a place of acceptance where we go, it's okay to morph and change on my way. And what does that look like? And how do we handle that so we don't feel defeat as we're moving through that? So we don't retreat to judging ourselves. And that's a real big part of it. And how we discover the deeper desire, the real passion about our life, and not getting stuck in there. No, this is where, this is it for me. How do we address that? How do we move through that? How do we make that
yeah.
okay
Well,
to change?
Well, and think about this. This is another piece of changing your awareness and changing your thought patterns, because it would be very easy, especially in the addiction recovery world, to say, "Oh, I've got the DNA, and it's
Mhm.
just who I am," or "My parents were addicts, and now I'm an addict. I can't do a thing about it. I'm just going to endure it. I'll go through the program a couple times. That's just kind of how it is." And we know that's so not true, that there is a strong connection between the mind and the body. And if you can change how you're viewing that, if you can change your thinking from I've got the DNA and there's nothing I can do, to I am strong and I have a vision of this. I am moving to my vision. I see, I'm here, but I also know that I'm more than my addiction. I'm more than alcohol. I'm more than my drugs. There's passion, and like you say, part of recovery is connecting to your passion, to your gift, to the to what you enjoy in life. And if you're constantly over here on the negative side, like this happened, then they argued, and I punched a guy, and now I'm arrested, and life is over here. It's like, no, life could be over here. You
Mhm.
could, you could be learning new things, making some money, investing and doing something that you love, helping people, and then next thing you know, you're moving from this side to that side. And it's that in that school environment that I think is that you have the support, because again, it's kind of like I like this example. A little kid plants seeds. So like you're in kindergarten, you get the little paper cup and you plant the seed, and then we water it every day, and then you see it come up, and it's an inch high, and you pull it out to see what's going on down there. It's like, well, no, 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 no. You got to wait till it's stronger. You got to build that. And I think tell me how that
So the
happened.
School of Recovery, you know, you're right. And what we're doing is connecting to the deeper self, the inner self, that silent self, and learning how that silent self and the mind are. Um, that's what we research. That's what we learn how to connect to. That's what we learn how to be in control of, to take care of. Because for me, Laura, many, many years ago in college, I went to school for the performing arts. And many years into my adult life, I spent that time either as an artist as an educator, as a president of large organizations around dance. And my journey went from actually beginning to learn about the theory and the psychology behind dance and performance and being okay to be out there to where I am today. And of course, and think about this in your own life. As that is morphing and changing, someone might say, well, how does a dance person get into the practice of the mind body regeneration, transformation? That's the journey. We are meant to evolve and to come to our greatest purpose. What are we here for? To what is my talent? What was my talent? So we're going to move through that knowing it's okay to keep changing as we go, as long as we learn from where are we listening, from what calm space are we moving into the next part of our life in here versus what does everyone expect of me, and what measure out there am I going to be measured as valued, successful, like that.
Yeah, part of what I've learned, and I think is helpful
Excuse me.
to the audience too, is that, and I'll just use weight loss. For years and years, I could eat it whatever I want. Obviously, as you get older, that doesn't apply. And all of a sudden, you find yourself grappling with something like weight, and one of the there's a lot of ways to handle that. One is just you just say, okay, I'm just going to weigh more. That's resign myself to that's the way it's going to be. Or you can change how you think about that. And part of, I think, one of the challenges of the Western world versus the Eastern world, the Western world really likes to deal with motivation, and I'm almost going to say willpower, in the sense that uh, especially in the guy world, it's just you just got to buckle down. You're just not going to eat the right things. If you're addicted, you're just not going to take a drink. You're just not going to have a smoke. You just buckle down. But one of the things I've learned is that that's push energy is very hard. The best example I've heard of was, imagine taking a beach ball and you're standing in a pool and you have to push that beach ball underwater. Now, can you do it? Absolutely. You can push that beach ball underwater, but it's going to take constant pressure to keep that beach ball under the water. And when you least expect it and you look the other way up, it pops up and now you're back. That kind of, to me, is kind of the challenge of, weight and exercise, and, doing that system of pushing. And to me, part of the value of the Eastern philosophy is that if you can delve into and connect to your inner spirit and change that thought that I am strong enough. There's the difference between walking past a box of cookies going, God, I'm not going to have one. I'm not going to have one. And walking past it in a way that you don't even see the cookies. It's like, no, cookies are not desirable to me. I am a new person now, and I have changed my inner thinking, so that there's no draw to that. There's no draw to the drink. There's no draw to the smoke. But that comes from this knowing who you are on the inside.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so, to me, part of the value of where you are going with the School of Recovery is that this would be an environment where people could come. And I want to say this, in my studies too, we love, Americans in particular love binary, on off, in out, black white, up down, and it's an either or. We always look at these as either or. I can either do this or I can do that. And I think one of the things that you're bringing, and talk to me about this, the yes and this. Yes, you're going to need some Western stuff. Yes, you're going to need vitamins. Yes, you're going to need some pharmacy stuff. But and the school provides you these other pieces. Talk about
Yes, because the school provides you, as I mentioned earlier, is healing the spirit of us. Once we learn what's going on in our body when we meet, when we're angry or we're hurt or we're disappointed, once we realize what's physiologically happening in our body and how, after a while, that wear on our body, ha- there's a consequence to that. We are given the opportunity to either practice those things which will shift us away from that kind of thinking or that kind of reactive behavior. It begins to shift the way we treat ourselves, the way we respond or react to different things we have going on here, and it allows us to, like we said, you're going to either take responsibility for your choices in life one way or the other. And for example, one of the things we do in my classes is we read, but we
Read.
read one sentence at a time. And this is a delight in the classes. Many of my students say to me, "Now I can't read anymore outside without stopping and thinking about what I read." Most people will read a paragraph, and at the end, they're not really sure what they read, or they give you this quick overview of, well, this is what it was about, blah blah. But if you really begin to say, okay, let's read the first two sentences here. What do they say? And you stop and you begin to understand the key words that you're reading. What does that mean? What does that mean on a different level? How have you experienced that word, or have you? We begin to think differently. We begin to understand deeper.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of aspects in the School of Recovery that really sustain our recovery, which bring us to a new level of how are we going to move into the next part of our life. Where's that knowingness coming from? Where's that stability coming from? And how do we use these tools when we feel ourselves under pressure?
Yeah. Now we have a couple minutes left. I want to talk. The School of Recovery is just about to go full tilt boogie.
Mhm.
You've been working with some people already. Tell me the vision. Tell me when. What would you love to have happen when the school is up and running? What who do you see involved? Who are your best students? Who,
Well,
what?
right now, Laura, as you know, I focus on those people in the field of addiction recovery. I am very passionate about the fact that there is a way to become enlightened. There is a way to calm down. There is a way to reclaim your life. But if we think about it, we're all in recovery, one way or the other. Right now, where the world's in a state of crisis, I've had, several people say to me, "Gee, Suze, I'm feeling forlorn. We almost call it a low grade depression that we're all suffering from, and we're all mourning the life we used to live." And it's okay to say that and admit to it, and on the other hand, be really grateful that now we're going to resume a life that's filled with knowledge, confidence, silence, quiet, clarity. That's the vision of the School of Recovery, that everybody who passes through those doors eventually feels that they are better connected to themselves, that they understand the workings of themselves inside versus just outside, and moves on. And we hope to inspire people to go on and live your dream, educate yourself, move into areas that you feel demonstrate why are you here in the first place.
Right. And to me, the hope and the excitement of this idea is again is that you, as you're going through life, you're listening to different people. You're listening to the Laura Meeks show. You're listening to Susan Lake. You're listening to Wayne Dyer, whoever you're listening to. All of that, because I love how you say that we're all in recovery, because in reality, all of us are living life. I mean, we all are down here, spiritual, in my world, spiritual beings experiencing this human life that we have and trying to grapple with why am I here? What's going on? And how do I handle the circumstances? And so often we get so wrapped up in the circumstance that we don't kind of broaden our view, think outside the box, and figure out what else is out there. And so to me, the value of the school and the excitement of building up the school is now, especially for those that you're working with in the area of recovery, they have this one Western model, but now they have this added extra zest. To me, the so much of what I've seen happen in your classes is the fact that all of a sudden people are aware of new ways to deal with the challenges that they're facing and to become aware of a bigger picture, aware
Mhm.
of that I do have talents, that I'm not I was the second child, and for me, one of the biggest challenges was I was always known as, my brother's little sister. It's like, well, that's I have a name, I have my own, I have my own world. Well, sadly, that is as much as we're going to get to talk about today. Susan, I really thank you for being here and
Thank you,
sharing
Laura.
sharing the School of Recovery with everybody that's out there. Again, you'll see on the bottom of the screen, schoolofrecovery.net, NET is a way to get a hold of it. That's coming up. And then SL for Susan Lake, Evergreen. So SL
And
Evergreen,
the @ sign goes in
at
front of
sign,
that.
at sign for that. That's a Facebook thing. So if you're trying to connect with her, other than that, I want to encourage you all to dream on, fly high, live adventurously. This is Laura Meeks, and you've been listening to the Laura Meeks Show. Thanks for coming.